Welcome back to the Let's Pivot podcast, the show for founders and coaches who want growth without the guesswork. We talk about systems that drive predictable growth. And today we're meeting with Damon and Mr. Damon Clark. And let's get into it. How'd you get started, sir?
Hey, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for the introduction. So, how did I get started in terms of my current career, or where?
Yeah, well,
How
how'd
far
you?
back did you
I
go?
mean, I see here you started your business. Obviously, you probably had some experience before that, but what made you decide to go out on your own and get started? And what what was that like? Starting your own business is not easy.
Yeah, I'll start. I mean, I started in corporate, like most people. So, I started with a company called Fujitsu Siemens, a large German stroke Japanese tech company, and during that time, I did a behavioral assessment. I did a DISC assessment, which I think a lot of people know about. It's a behavior assessment, and it just changed my life. I mean, I knew I was one of the top performers because my results were good. I was in sales at the time, but I always sensed my manager had a frustration with me and I couldn't quite figure out why. So after doing my DISC training, I realized my communication or my self-awareness was terrible. My communication was even worse. And I realized I needed to adapt my communication according to my manager's style. So pre-DISC, I was very high level, very kind of flaky. But after doing my DISC training, I realized my manager was quite analytical. So I had to adapt from that style to, hey, John, I think I'm going to finish on 120% at the end of a quarter and I need help with ABC. So as soon as I adapted my communication with him, our relationship got better and I became obsessed with personal development, particularly behavior science. So that was the kind of start of leading me on that journey and that focus on what I do. And then also, I'm a maverick. So I work with a predictive assessment or a behavioral assessment product called Predictive Index, and they have 17 reference profiles, and I'm what they call a maverick. So I'm very comfortable with ambiguity, very fast paced, very entrepreneurial. So some of it was in my nature, but I really struggled in corporate. Although I was very successful, knowing now, I have a high dominance, which is a behavioral drive to influence people and events. And that can be quite prickly and hard in corporate land. So although I had a successful career, I really flourished when I went out on my own. And so I took the jump in the UK and built a successful organization over in the UK focused on development and team development. Sold that company, relocated to the US to be closer to my wife's family. And I actually didn't think I'd have my own business again because going through that journey was horrendous for 8-9 years. I mean, it was super successful. I mean, the first year, I literally had no money. The second year, pretty much the same. It was only the third and fourth year things started to pick up. So I didn't really want to go through that again. So I ended up going back into corporate and eventually landed at Predictive Index at the company I'm now a partner of and had a few years there. And then they offered me an opportunity to spin out on my own and take over part of the business. And so I became an independent management consultancy, basically. And here I am today.
Well, that's a pretty good story. You did mention communication as like one of the key things there. How was that changing from the communication style that you were used to the communication style that you needed to change to for your boss at the time? What was that transition like?
Yeah, so we all have a hard-baked DNA when it comes to communication and behavior. The key is how we can understand, have that awareness, and how we can understand others and adapt it. So often with leaders, generally they kind of develop that over time. That's why they're leaders. But early on in your career, that self-awareness is there. So we have that hard-baked DNA when it comes to communication. Make decisions quickly. Do we brainstorm or do we like to reflect and look at some data? There's lots of ways we kind of, what influences our communication. The key is understanding how you need to adapt in certain situations. So I think my journey started quite early on. And I think it was a very slow journey. It wasn't instant. Now where I live and breathe behavioral science, I mean, it's my specialism. I'm a lot better. It's very instinctive now. I have kind of very habitual behavior when it comes to adapting communication. But that took a long time to get to.
And I'm just guessing that has to really help a lot in your personal relationships as well, probably, right? That
My wife,
communicating.
yeah, my say no. She's hardwired completely different from me. Her behavioral style is the complete opposite, and that's how we work so well together. But yeah, I speak fluent, so it's funny amongst my predictive index peers. I mean, we work with DISC, Myers-Briggs, and predictive index, but I speak what we call fluent PI. So with other PI people, we're very we use that language a lot, and for other people it seems like we've been brainwashed at a cult retreat. But yeah, I instinctively am a lot better at kind of adapting it naturally now.
Okay. And, obviously there is a need for a strong strategic foundation, building a business, building something of worth. What is your philosophy for that, for building that strong strategic foundation?
Yeah, I think it's one part people miss. So my job is to work with dysfunctional leadership teams. That's why I normally get pulled in, because there's some dysfunction. Not always. I mean, I must be very clear here, we work at very progressive people first organizations, and they're a pleasure to work with, and they're very proactive about how they look after their leadership teams and the rest of the organization and how we develop them. But often I'm brought in because of dysfunction. And so I head in, and it's not they do need help with communication and vulnerability-based trust and conflict and all those great subjects. I often find 9 times out of 10, they don't have a robust methodology of developing, implementing and tracking strategy. Now that's a bigger problem for what I do. So my job is to work that leadership team to execute strategy and be kind of match fit or game fit to actually be able to hit those goals. But if those goals aren't set up properly, that's where we need to start. So in my experience, for companies who are good at that and have a very strong methodology, whether it's EOS, scaling up, Pinnacle, OKRs, whatever it is, there's lots of systems out there. They're the ones that flourish and grow because they're very strategic. They're thinking about that 10-year mission. They broke it down to a 3-year, to a year, to quarterly cycle. They have their strategic meetings where they discuss, the KPIs to get to that year target. They have very purposeful meetings which are structured properly. Those organizations which have cracked that are the ones that grow. They're the 10x organizations. So we adopt that methodology ourselves, and we're 10x growth. We've gone from 0 to 60 clients in 4 years, and I contribute most of that to having a really solid strategy base, and we live and breathe it.
Okay. What's one of the major pitfalls that you see time and time again, or most common pitfalls that you see companies run into as far as with strategic planning and that sort of thing?
Not even doing it, firstly. You'll be surprised. Even Fortune 100 organizations often struggle with it. I mean, it's a more complex situation with those organizations, but often I find kind of from organizations from 10 people to mid-market to 200 that they don't even have a methodology to do it. So that's the first one. The second issue would be committing to too many goals. If they are in that process of realizing we need that 2-day offsite, we need that senior leadership team, we need that offsite, we need to do the planning. If they have moved on to that part of their journey and are identified that's a need, we move into another set of challenges, and that can include committing to doing too much. It can include not being able to run meetings very well. It can include not having a third party facilitator to navigate that. They often try and do it on their own, and it's just a lot easier to have an expert come in and do it. It's a lot quicker, a lot more efficient. Also, we can't get fired for asking difficult conversations. And also, we charge a lot of money, and you have to commit to doing it. So that's another issue, is not actually getting someone in to come and kind of support that journey. And there's a few other things I see which always pop up. I can almost play leadership team bingo, because there's always the same things. We often have high dominant behavior dominating for meetings, and we're getting some artificial harmony in there, and people not really comfortable with healthy conflict. That's another challenge we get. Yeah, it's a bit strategic, actually, strategic mindsets in there as well. You know, we have leadership teams not operating as a leadership team. They come to those meetings and they have basically, we call them weather forecast meetings. This is what's happening in finance. This is what's happening in marketing, sales. And they're not having that separate strategic leadership meeting, looking at those high level strategic issues. And they don't, you know, whether you're a finance leader, you're still responsible to those leadership goals, you know, and it could be sales goals. And so we're not seeing that strategic mindset as another common challenge we find.
Okay. Okay. Um, and let me ask you, as far as the use of data to support ROI and knowing exactly where to focus, is that something that you help align the companies on? Or is that something that's already there and you just try to adjust it?
Yeah, so data. So bizarrely, my natural behavioral style is not such a data person, but to do what I do, I have to be very focused on data. So there's a few things we focus on data. So from a strategy point of view, it starts with that data. So, you know, I'm going to try and make this concise, but, you know, when we work for clients, we know we're working on that 10-year North Star. We start off with mission, vision, values, and then we look at that 10-year North Star and back into that 3-year, 1-year, quarterly cycles. But the data is so key. Understanding that forecast, having that really solid understanding of the forecast and those targets get really important. And those tracking those metrics, particularly on the KPIs. So on those strategic meetings, understanding what's your main, we call them rocks, you know, each leader's focus initiative, what their main goals are, where they're tracking along those goals, and also having a system to manage that. So we use a performance management software. So we have total, we call it line of sight through the whole organization or where everybody is on those overarching goals, and having a software to do that. So we do a little bit of work on there. And then when we switch over to the talent part, so our business, we do strategy, talent development, or talent strategy, business strategy, and we do a little bit of work on building organizational development. But on the strategy part, data just lives and breathes everything we do. It all starts with data. On the talent part, that's a whole podcast in itself. So, you know, we typically find the industry we're in is very early stages. You know, typically HR, you know, was built for hiring and firing, and now we're understanding that HR teams have to be a lot more strategic. So we help build talent strategies, and in that talent strategy, data flows into it, you know, from employee surveys to benchmarking the leadership team's health and trying to understand how we can make an impact on that talent. How can we support that talent execute the strategy? And so data is important. Otherwise, in a year's time, when someone's paying us, they're going to say, hey, what have you done? And it gets very hard because, like, salespeople come to those board meetings with data. Marketing people come with MQLs and data. Finance people got loads of data. Typically, HR people are like, data. So we have to, as an organization, be really good at building data. And we can do it. We've got NPS scores, we've got engagement surveys, we've got employee health reports. There's lots of ways we can find data. And so we like to do that, to help prove ROI, but also know where to focus. So when another example is leadership teams. We find that when they do team development, it's like an afterthought on an offsite. So they're organizing an offsite and someone says, oh, we should do some training or team building. And they say, Brian or Barbara, what did you do at your last company? And they say, oh, we used this person, they came in. And that's not how you develop leadership teams. It's not strategic, it's not data driven. So what we like to do is go in and start by trying to sort of benchmark that team's health and try and understand where they are on their journey and where we need to focus. I mean, it could be psychological safety. It could be having difficult conversations. It could be communication. It could be trust. So we like to kind of start off by looking at data to understand where to focus and also to benchmark where we are and to work out where we want to get to. So yeah, data flows into everything we do.
And so figuring out which data you need and then compiling it and then measuring it, is that a challenge at all?
No, because we have software that does that now.
You have software that does that, so it makes it easy for you.
Yeah, so I mean, personally, in our infrastructure, our kind of, I can't think of a word, our technology stack, We have performance management software, which tracks all our goals and where everyone is on their objectives. So, I can instantly see where my whole team is, stacking up to hit my target. I can tell you the exact numbers. I'll be honest, we've overachieved on revenue this year. We've hit our marketing metrics. Oh, no, we've all hit 2 of our 3 marketing metrics, and we're about 70% on the other one, which we're not going to hit.
Congratulations.
Well, embarrassingly, that was my target. We're out of our 3 marketing metrics. We're 70% on one of them, and I'm not going to be able to do that for the end of the year. And then we have a separate target for right people, right seats, and basically developing teams, and because that's what we do as a business. So we're quite strong on that. We've hit those targets, and then our client success numbers are I think out of the 3 of the main goals, we're about 80% on one of them, and we're going to struggle. But yeah, so we have that built, so I know exactly where all the team are and how we're doing. And then we have our cadence of our meetings, so we will dig into them, and if there's a problem, we'll move it to an issue to discuss as a leadership team on how we solve it and get it back on track. So we have a very tight system, which is controlled by our performance management software. And that's actually a predictive index product as well. It actually brings in behavioral data to make sure we all understand how to work with each other and all our styles. So on that part, we've got data locked down. And then on the marketing and sales part, we've got a HubSpot enterprise account. So we have our dashboard built, so I know exactly how many deals on our pipeline, at what stage they are. I know all the marketing metrics coming in. I know all the clients' success metrics on renewals and performance and client health. So yeah, everything's tracked through HubSpot and Predictive Index performance management.
Okay. And then about how often do you let the team know where they're at, or hey, you're hitting your goals, you're not quite there? Do you wait till there's an issue, or?
I don't really, because they know, because it's on their dashboard.
Oh, so they can just see it on their dashboard.
They all see the dashboard, so they know. And if they've got an issue, and we have that, we're a small team, but we have that weekly meeting. But we do it for our clients as well. So the same with our clients. They again, we've got 4 or 5 projects we're going on at the moment, which is basically a similar thing. I'm talking about my example, but we've got 4 or 5 clients, and one client, for example, just too many goals. So they're trying to get clarity, and they've got to go through that stage to kind of work, because they're growing like crazy. And as they're growing, they're getting a lot of inefficiencies. It's like a sponge. So what's happening is the CEO hasn't got line of sight, doesn't know what's going on, balls are being dropped. And so we're working with them to build that infrastructure to try and kind of get that clarity. But there's 2 things that need to happen. There's that offsite and that facilitation to get the goals down, because the leadership team is committing to too much. And then there's the implementation of the technology. So I said earlier, it's developing strategy, implementing it, and tracking it are the 3 areas, and having a software to do that. So once that, and it takes a few years for that muscle to work. So the technology works quite well, but what we're doing in those cycles of planning is capacity planning. How many initiatives can each leader take on? And typically they commit to too much. And then the next year they commit to less, but still too much. And it normally takes like 3 years for them to start realizing, okay, here's what I'm committing to. If anything else comes in during the year, or what's going to come off, is it a to-do? Is it a quarterly initiative? Is it more important for this? So working on that meeting structure and that muscle to understand those questions, because often, typically, we get leaders say, we'll just do that. Behaviorally, our leadership teams are normally very comfortable with ambiguity. They're normally, very task orientated, and will basically get shit done. Whereas the rest of the organization struggle with those mindsets. So over time, we start working with these leadership teams to understand that and kind of be a little bit more, not calculated, but a little bit more purposeful in setting their goals and sticking to them and understanding what's achievable and what's not achievable.
And is there an optimal number of goals for a specific leader, or does it just depend on the person, or kind of what the company's doing?
I'll answer that in a different way. So the first thing to understand is, what is a quarterly goal? Actually, a goal, I say you got your goals and you got your strategy to achieve those goals. So, or this is another, I'm actually writing a blog on this. What's the difference between a KPI, a goal, an objective, a strategy, a ROC, an OKR? It just drives me crazy. But, or a strategic objective, yeah. So effectively, we have our goals and where we want to get to, and then we'll have each leader will have, a number of initiatives outside their day to day. And what's important is defining what that is, and then figuring out what's an initiative, what's a to do, what's a strategic initiative. Is it going to add up to hitting those goals? And let's remember what those goals are. Remember, we've done that 10-year, 5-year, 3-year, 1 year. Is it really going to move the needle there? And being really purposeful of prioritizing and building a parking lot and knowing what comes off, what goes on. So I think I went off a tangent on your question there. What was the original question?
Well, a little bit. I think I understand, and I'll compare it to American football. I know you're from England, so I don't want to. I
Well, it's
don't want to.
rugby, but just
Great,
not so
great.
good.
I played rugby in college, a great sport. But yeah, so in American football, right? The maybe the big goal for the year is to win the Super Bowl. But the smaller goals, maybe, hey, we need 3 yards to get a first down, right? And then we need to punt the ball or, kick a field goal and get a couple of points here. So I think if I'm understanding you, it's breaking down from the big to the smaller, and everybody on the team has to have a slightly different goal,
I think
right?
it's getting the team on the same page on the terminology is the starting point, because
Okay.
there's a lot of confusion there. Once you're on the same page for terminology, it's setting up the system to make sure the senior leadership team are thinking big picture and are not getting too in the reads, and having a system to enable that. If a go-to-market team, for example, have like 5 key initiatives, it's understanding how they stack up and how they're measured. Just to, it's building out infrastructure is important.
Okay. I think I understand. And you talked a little bit about the predictive index and DISC. How does that behavioral and neuroscience play into supporting coaching?
Yeah. So once we've built that strategy, we by the way, we use consultants to come in and do that, and we normally will align a tech consultant who specializes in strategy to work with our tech companies. And then the next part is making sure that the teams are aligned to execute that. Now that's the bit where we started off doing. I think the business is 50-50 now. We started off building those talent strategies. So initially we'll go in and work potentially with the CEO or CHRO and the leadership team to do that due diligence on the data, and we'll help build a talent strategy. So we're looking at performance management, we're looking at leadership developments, we're looking at employee engagement, employee development. So we'll look at those areas, and then we'll work out what tools we need to support that. So predictive, what I like about, we use 2 main tools: 5 behaviors, which is a leadership team or a team development tool. It gives you a benchmark performance, and it looks at trust, conflict, commitment, accountability, and results. So we often use that as a starting point. Then we start pushing or building development into the organization. So typically we start the leadership team. If we get the leadership team right, they naturally teach the team below. And what we found in the olden days, all this fancy developments on communication and trust and having difficult conversation was always focused on the leadership team, because it was too expensive to do the whole organization, because we cost a lot of money to come in. But now, because of software, it's not the case. So what we find, we'll work a little bit hands-on with the leadership team, and we'll look at communication and difficult conversations and all that wonderful stuff, which we typically know they need. But then we'll work with an internal team, usually in HR or talent development, to give them the knowledge transfer to roll out the same language to the whole organization, because the software can drive it. If the software wasn't there before, so we can do the same training to the whole organization. We just do it in a slightly different way, a little bit more online learning, a little bit more internal training rather than using an outsourced person, and also train the trainer. So if we do that deeper training up above may naturally teach for teams below. Because I don't have to know the ins and outs of behavioral science, because the software does it for them. They just need to pull up a relationship guide or spin up a team dynamics matrix to look at the team type and how behaviorally they work together and what caution areas they may have. So the software does all the heavy lifting for them. So that's typically how we kind of work. We'll work in kind of a multi-pronged approach to go hands-on senior and then roll out the same training with their HR team, and they manage that part. And the benefit of that is just more stickiness. You know, imagine all the training we've done in the past where you do this amazing training, you leave so excited, and you put that, whatever it is, in a filing cabinet and never look at it again. We like to do less content and more action planning and making sure it's more sustained. So that's I think, the transformation that's happened recently, where you can really make these programs a lot more sticky and powerful and improve engagement and retention and all those wonderful things.
And with those softwares, do you see automation? Do you see AI playing a bigger part, more integral part as we go forward?
Every single day. So I'll give you a great example. So one of the products we use with Predictive Index is we can use behavioral science to analyze the job and then map the candidate. So we know we can use behavioral science to understand a person's behavior, look at their strengths and caution areas. We can also do that as a team. We can look at a team's collective caution areas and strengths. We can even align that team to strategy and look into the future and say, well, this team's going to struggle because they're just not hardwired to think about process. And we can put plans in place to prevent them missing those targets. So we can do some amazing with technology. Slight sidetrack. But the example I often use on recently is we can also put the right person in the right seat. Now, if you put someone who's analytical or someone who's, let me think, you need someone comfortable with ambiguity, likes interacting with people, comfortable with variety in their day-to-day, and comfortable not following a playbook. If you put them in a job, let's say a finance job, which is all about following rules and structure, all about consistency and stability, all about processing data and being not amongst people and collaborating, that's like putting a left-hand person in a right-hand person's job. So we can analyze now using technology and map those candidates so we can improve job success predictability. Now, in the software, the AI, it will now build a interview questionnaire focused on the misalignment between the areas the person will struggle with for job, and it will ask questions upon that. So the software now in this area is becoming just so much more advanced by using AI, tailoring it more, thinking more, and also the AI will build a job ad for you using the language that resonates with the behavioral profile you're trying to attract. So we're seeing a lot more AI, and the companies winning, of course, are the ones realizing they have to build this AI in. And Predictive Index is doing it amazingly. So we're seeing AI updates from them every single day, and it's making our job a lot better. You've got to change. We can't build job ads for people now because so we have to understand it's coming and it's disrupting, and we have to pivot with it, which is fine. There's no point ignoring it. So yeah, we're seeing a lot more AI being integrated in the tools we use, and it's quite exciting.
And so it sounds like you're pretty much getting in front of that wave of what's coming.
I'm not too sure I have done. I have absolutely ignored it. Now, I've been using it myself, so I've slowly progressed using AI into my day-to-day. But I think it's only recently I've said, right now, and I make no apologies for that. I didn't want to get distracted. I built, again, we use that process at the start of the year, and I didn't want to pivot and lose sight of what we really need to achieve this year, particularly as AI we're still learning. But now is definitely the time. We're looking at AI assistance. We're looking at client success. We can now use AI to teach it to look at our videos, our tutorial videos, and respond to client success inquiries by using our built data. So we'll go into next year leveraging a lot more AI in our day-to-day for sure. Now's the time that we have to, and I see it as a huge competitive advantage.
Okay. Hey, I see we've been on here for a while. It's been a very interesting conversation. You're obviously very passionate about all the stuff that you do, coaching, the behavioral science behind it, obviously why you've been so successful. So I just wanted to tell you thank you for taking the time to talk with me today. Before we jump off of here, though, I did want to ask you, a guy starting out a new company, right, trying to get going, what's one piece of advice you would give me?
I'm gonna answer this one probably differently from I think other people. I can give a generic answer of resilience and don't worry about making mistakes but I'm gonna say two things which is the opposite advice that I think people get. First of all, you have to grind. It doesn't come easy. It is 12-hour days. I mean, I've not done what I've done by, getting to my desk at 9 and going at 5. I'm up at 5:30 and still working till 10 o'clock at night. You're not going to build it. There has to be, of course, you got to be smart and stuff. So I think, particularly maybe with a new generation coming through, I think we could gossip about this forever. I think there's, life for living. And that petrifies me because we're going to get to 60 and you've got another 40 years to fund yourself. I remember when I left university, it was like, get a job, work hard, get a promotion. And I think the next generation, well, why would I want to do that? Why do I want to just work and work and work? And the simple truth is life sucks. It's going to suck a lot more if you don't have, a pension and a backup when you get to 60. And so much, I think life's for living and stuff. It's, there is a reality. What's that balance between work and money and leisure? And I do get a lot of time off with a family and I'm very fortunate. So that's the first bit is it takes grind and hard work. The second one is be honest. Try and get some independent advice on whether you can do it. You need a long runway. Sometimes, particularly the coaches, I work with coaches all the time and many of them have never been in this, we look at competence when it comes to a coach. Have you got a qualification? Have you got experience? Have you got a methodology? And 80% of the coaches who kind of come to us struggle with one of them, let alone all three. And I think within business, it's being really honest with yourself, about the due diligence on whether there's an opportunity where the market there and whether you've got the skills to actually do it. And I think having a third party to kind of be really honest with you, and that's a bit of strange advice because I think most advice is like, yeah, just go do it. But you go somehow have a sanity check on whether what you're doing, you've got a chance of being successful. Because I think it's something like 2 in 3 businesses fail. So, and if you do fail, that's fine. That's fine. It's part of the process. But make sure before you commit your savings to it. on whether you have got what it takes or the market's there or opportunities there. So just do your research.
Okay. Kind of like when I was in high school, I wanted to play in the NBA, huh?
I'm going to go off. I'm sorry. I'm going to go off on that. I really get annoyed by parents who are like, oh, our kids aren't going to do that. Let's be realistic. As a parent, you say, yeah, you go play for the NBA. You try. You don't suppress that dream because even if you don't do it, those skills and that motivation is transferable to anything else. So I have a bit of a passionate people. Parents are like, oh, only 1% make it to college to play sport and only 1% of that. And, our kids are not going to do it. I'm like, how dare you? If I believed in everything everyone told me as a kid, I wouldn't have, I'd be working in a factory somewhere, making rubber chickens. You shouldn't suppress a kid's dreams. So if you want to play, it's not too late.
I'm almost 50.
But I think we should always dream big. I'm a big believer in that. I don't want to suppress people's dreams, but I think, and also just being honest about, realistic dreams are great and you should always aim high, but also having a kind of system just to benchmark your dream isn't going to get you into trouble.
Okay. Hey, Damon, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today. This was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. I really appreciate your time.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.